right. Good morning. My name is Michelle, and welcome to Waters Garden Center. Today's class is going to be all about fruit trees. So hopefully we'll get all your questions answered, and you'll get some information, and you'll be able to go home and do a really good job of planting and picking out the type of tree that you want. So one of the most frequently asked questions that I receive is what trees are good to plant in this area? And basically we can do most of them except for the citrus. Obviously we get just way too cold for citrus. The citrus trees we've done as houseplants before. You just have to bring them in the wintertime and take them back out in the summer. But we do the full gambit. Apples, we do all sorts of varieties of apples. Granny Smith, Honeycrisp, Fuji, Jonathan, Gala, Gravenstein, which is a great pie apple. So there's a whole variety of different apples that do well here. We do pears, from Bartlett to Bosque, Camise, some of the Oriental pears, Danjou, which is a great one. Peaches, we get the Alberta, Red Haven, Reliance. We have a couple of white peaches, which are really very tasty. Apricots, there's like 3 or 4 varieties of those. Right now we just have the Tilton, but later on in the spring we will have the Horkart, the Chinese evergreen, or the Chinese apricot. We have cherry trees, where we have Bings, Stellas, Lapins. The Stella and the Lapin are both self-pollinating, which is great. We have some Utah Giants. We actually have a 4-in-1 cherry tree. So there's a great variety of that. Plums. Most of your plums do really, really well. From the Italian prune to Santa Rosa, which are the nice big purple plums. The Black Beauty, the Elephant Heart. So you can do just about everything. Pomegranates do great up here. Gorgeous flowers for an ornamental shrub, if you wanted something like that. They have these gorgeous, pretty, bright orange flowers, and they get about the variety that we usually get. It gets about 6 foot, so it's a nice big shrub. So there are a lot of fruit trees that we can do here. So the thing that I want to talk to you about is we all have different locations in our yards that we want to put these trees. And the great thing about the fruit trees is that they're very easily toppable. So most fruit trees come in a variety of sizes. There are some true dwarfs like this peach right here. This is the Bonfire Peach. And I'll get more into it, but basically he's going to get about 6 feet. Your semi-dwarf fruit trees, which most of these are that we carry, naturally they will get in that 12 to 15 size range. And your standard fruit trees will get 30 feet. That being said, most of us can't reach a 30-foot apple. So most fruit trees we usually end up topping, which is great because we can actually get to the fruit. So when you go, when you're thinking about space, kind of keep that in mind, about where you're going to put it and such. Most of your fruit trees need full sun. So that is kind of the area that you're looking to plant them in. With the fruit trees, we want to be able to take care of them properly, and I'm going to touch on that, exactly how to plant them. So what I want to start first is kind of do a show and tell of what I have here. And then we'll proceed into other sections, okay? So we will start with this guy here. And he is my 4-in-1 cherry, which is great. One thing about fruit trees is there are several varieties. Do you need me pulling forward? So there are fruit trees that need pollinators, and some of your cherries and your plums, apples, and pears, most of them need a pollinator. There are a few exceptions to this rule, but the nice thing about this 4-in-1 cherry is it has 4 different varieties that are going to pollinate each other. So this is a great tree if you have a smaller space and can only do one tree. There are 4-in-1 apple trees out there, and then I have some 4-in-1 pears left that have 4 different varieties, so you get that cross-pollination. When you walk around our nursery, you will see large pollination signs like this if you actually need a pollinator. And this will actually tell you which trees go with which. So this will help out. The ones that say self are one of the ones that actually will be self-pollinating. So like I mentioned earlier, the Stella and the Lapin cherry are both self-pollinating. All of your peaches and apricots are self-pollinating as well, along with your nectarines. All those fruits are self-pollinating. The Santa Rosa plum is a self-pollinator. The Gala apple and the Fuji apple are both self-pollinating. Bartlett pear is a self-pollinator. So there are a few in that mix that can do it all by themselves. Yes?
Just point out to the people here, I'm going to do a sign-up sheet. Have to run down and get it, pass it around, give us your email address. We will send you handouts. It's actually, I created a landing page on the website. All of the pollination charts that the shelves referring to, some other stuff. We'll be hard on that.
Okay, great. So we will move onward and we'll talk about this 4-in-1 cherry. So the great thing about this one, it has a Bing and a black Nectarine cherry. These are all sweet cherries. And it also has a Van and a Lapin. So you get a lot of the black Nectarine and the Bing will self-pollinate, and then you have the Lapin and the Van that will self-pollinate on this tree. So that's the great thing about these guys. All right. This guy here is a plum. This is the Santa Rosa plum. Nice, bright pink red fruit. It is a self-pollinator, so you only need the one tree. If you let him, again, he will get in that 15-foot range. Most people will start pruning after the 3rd or 4th year, so you can keep them whatever size you want. But white flowers, beautiful white flowers. And another great thing about fruit trees is they make great fall color. Most of them will turn that beautiful orange color in the fall. Your apples will go kind of yellow, but they make great trees as well for your landscape. I'm going to get a workout today. This guy here is a nectarine. The other great thing about your nectarines, apricots, and peaches is they've got beautiful pink flowers. They're just absolutely gorgeous. And the nectarines are actually a double flower. So great ornamental tree for a lot of different reasons. Most of our fruit trees here will also end up fruiting this year. which we recommend that you actually kind of pick most of it off, because it usually takes 2 or 3 years to actually get your tree established. And we want all of that energy to go to your root zone. Without healthy, strong roots, you will not have a strong canopy, and you won't get the fruit like you want to get. So it is tempting to let it just, yay, I got fruit. But you kind of really want to hold off on that, because fruit production takes a lot of energy. This is our Reliance Peach. This is a nice large peach with a nice bright red skin. It is a freestone, so that's always a great plus for me. Pink flowers, again, whatever size you want it to be, you can definitely let it go. Great little tree. This is a Bing cherry tree, and this one actually needs a pollinator. So your Bings will not pollinate another Bing. You have to get a different type of tree. So the Rainier, which I don't have right now, but the Lapin, the Stella will all pollinate this guy. So read your tags or ask one of our salesperson people, and we'll get you all up to date on the pollination. So this guy here is a unique peach. He is a Bonfire Peach. And the really cool thing about this guy here is he has purple leaves. So he has purple foliage all summer long. So it's kind of unique that way. Oh, I didn't hold him up tall enough. Okay. We have also the Bonanza Peach right now, which is also a true dwarf. And these guys will get about 6 by 6. I have a Pixie at home, and this will be his 3rd summer. And he is about this tall right now and about this wide. And my chicken wire is a little small. I'm going to have to extend it. I have deer that come through, and I won't have a tree if I leave him out. There are options for smaller trees if you have a smaller space. Okay. This is a Fuji apple tree. He is self-pollinating, so you don't need a pollinator. Or if you want to use it, you can definitely have another fruit tree, and you'll get more apples out of all of them. But it always has to be a different variety. Weird. Okay. They kind of hid my trees. Okay. This isn't a fruit tree, but this is an all-in-one almond tree. And this is one of the few nuts that we can actually grow up here. And this is self-fertile, so you only need the one tree, but you will actually get almonds out of this guy. Beautiful white flowers. There is another almond tree that gets pink flowers, and it is the hardy almond. It's called hardy almond. Excuse me a minute. There we go. Thank you, sir. Now I'm all caught up. Okay. This is a pear tree. This is the Sensation Red Bartlett pear. Beautiful red skin on the fruit, and basically your same flavor as a regular Bartlett. And for some reason I have two pear trees, but that's okay. This is the red Danjou, and we also have the green Danjou, so we have both varieties. Late season fruit, these guys are awesome. And the Danjou needs a pollinator. Okay, so we got to learn about all the different types of trees that we have. I kind of want to go into how to plant them. So what we start out with when we walk around with guests like you, when you go to plant anything, you want to dig your hole twice as wide as the bucket that they're in. And just as deep. So you don't want to go super deep, just as deep. You want, when you finish out the day and you're planting, this hole is going to be even with the soil on top. You're going to mix 2/3 natural soil because they have to get used to living here and in the soil that you live in. And you might think, oh, my soil here is worse than anybody else's, but we all have, sorry, I'm talking too fast. We all have the same issues in just different ways. A lot of us have a lot of clay soils. Some of us live in more rocky areas where there's a DG, a lot of DG. So we want to amend that soil with mulch, and that helps break up the clay. It gives moisture power to our DG, so we're all set there. When we plant, there are 3 things that we need to plant the tree. So we already talked about the mulch. You want to mix fertilizer in with that mixture when you're backfilling, when you're planting, and then you want to top it off with the root and grow. The root and grow helps stimulate the hair roots on the tree and gets that root system moving in the soil. So it also, when you're planting them when they're dormant, you don't get a lot of stress. But if you're planting them mid-May when the heat is up, you will get stress. And this helps cut that back. A couple years ago, Ken brought out the fruit and vegetable food, and this is what we use to amend and fertilize our vegetable gardens and our fruit trees. It is a 6-4-4-6, and so that 6 on the end is extra calcium, which helps in fruit production, better tasting fruit. Kind of the same thing it does in your vegetable gardens with your tomatoes and such. And also tree stakes. I always recommend anytime you plant a tree, you want to stake your tree. Our wind blows all the time here. And it's one of those things that we You just have to make sure that it's properly staked. We want our tree to move a little bit because when the tree moves in the wind, it makes a stronger trunk. The trick is that we don't want the root ball to move, and that's what the stakes do. As far as time to plant, now is a great time to get planted. Like I mentioned before, when they are dormant, you don't have that stress. Also, right now, I have a ton of fruit trees, and sometimes later in the season, I start to run out of different varieties. So if you have a particular type that you like, now's a good time to do it. Maintenance on trees. There are a few things that happen with trees naturally. Fruit trees tend to get thrip pretty regularly, along with a lot of our ornamentals, ornamental pears, plums also get thrip. So we want to protect from a lot of different things. So the all seasons dormant oil, you spray when the tree is dormant. Basically what that does is you are coating this tree with this substance, and it smothers everything that's laying dormant on this tree. So all the fungal issues, aphids, thrips that might be on here, we're going to suffocate. And that's what this does. Another use for this dormant oil, has anybody ever had an apple tree and they have all the wormholes in it? So those wormholes are actually coddling moth, and it's not a worm going in, it's actually coming out. So what happens on your apples and your pear trees is that the coddling moths actually lay the eggs in the flowers when it's blooming. So we do have, and I forgot to bring it up, coddling moth traps that if you have a small enough tree, you can actually put a couple in there and it'll actually attract them. There's a pheromone in there. So they'll all go in there and die rather than lay the eggs in your tree. You can also spray your flowers with this dormant oil. And it's all about the timing. But once your flowers open and you want to spray those flowers, and you want to do it early in the morning or late in the evening when the bees aren't present. Because if you hit a bee with this, you will end up suffocating the bee. And you're going to do it probably every 5 to 7 days, because your flowers don't all open up at the same time. And so you want to kind of adjust it so you get it all of your flowers at the same time. The other problem with some of the fruit trees is they do get borers. Your peach trees will get a borer. Your cherry trees that sometimes will have a borer in them. So if you protect them with the plant protector, and with this product, you want to be careful upon use. You don't want to do it while it's blooming. You want to wait until afterwards, because it will kill the bees. So if you wait until after it's bloomed, by the time it gets up to where the flowers were, the structure changes. So it doesn't get into the fruit, it just stays in the tree. So that it's a great product to make sure you're protecting your trees. Bird netting. There's nothing more frustrating than to have your beautiful tree full of fruit and then you go out and then everyone you pick off has a hole, or half of it's gone because something is eating it. Protecting your tree early is very, very important. So you want to make sure that after your cherry tree blooms, you get this net on, and you want to make sure it's secured down below. If you leave any space for the birds to get into, they will find a way into your tree. And netting is the easiest way to protect your tree. Really quick, I just want to touch on a few other fruits that we can do here. And there's a whole other class on small edibles, but since I have them, strawberries do great here. So if you have a smaller yard, a patio or such, strawberries are a great way to incorporate fruit into your landscape. Raspberries, yes, this is a stick, and this is what it's supposed to look like this time of year. Don't panic. This one came in looking nice, but if you took this out and you planted it, all the foliage will probably dry up and die, but your plant will be fine. It just needs to go through that dormancy period. So don't worry, it'll be just fine. Okay. Sure. So this gentleman just asked about gopher protection and baskets. So yes, that is very important. If you actually have, if you have them, we do have gopher baskets in various sizes that you can utilize. Myself, I would try to get rid of the gophers on top of everything. And yes, it's a very daunting process. And it's not something that's one and done. It's something that you have to stay up on. If you don't, you will have millions of them. They have 3 litters a year. And that's a whole other class. We have a pest class, but yes. So we have them in 1 gallons, 5 gallons, and 15. So if you have gophers, I would definitely protect your root ball with that. So his question was the proximity of how far apart do your fruit trees need to be. So as long as they're within 25 to 50 feet, you're going to get pollination. If you have a neighbor that's right next door and they have an apple tree and you have an apple tree, you're most likely going to get pollination. Yes. Their cicadas are not particular on what type of tree they will go on. So yeah, there's not one that's going to do better or worse than any other. So this is a little diagram that we came up with a couple of years ago. Can you see it, Ken? Are we good?
Sure.
Okay, great. Sorry. This will just give you kind of a timeline, and feel free later on to come up and take a picture of it. It'll also be part of the sheets that go out to you, so we'll make sure that everybody gets one. It's just kind of a timeline of the process of things that we're going to do. So January, February, as I said, the dormant oil will go on. It protects your trees from a lot of different situations. February, March is time to prune. Sometimes people ask me, do I need to prune a tree? The answer is yes and no. If you have damaged leaves or branches, absolutely, you don't want those on your tree. If you have branches that are crossing, you don't want that on your tree. and there is a fruit tree pruning class that's coming up soon, I think. So we'll have more on that. But most trees, when you prune them, you kind of want this nice base shape. And that way you get airflow in there, you get lots of light, sunlight, for better fruit production and such. So that's kind of what you want to focus on when you're pruning. You don't want things going inside towards the trunk of your tree. You want everything to be going out. So those are the branches that you want to touch on. March and April is fertilization. And so for those that are new here, fertilization on all your plantscapes is very, very important here. We have very nasty soil, as anybody that's trying to dig a hole has found out. There are a lot of nutrients in it, but because it's all compacted, the trees and plants cannot absorb the nutrients that are in it. So we need to help them out. So that's why we fertilize 3 times a year for your deciduous trees. And just a little reminder, deciduous means that it's going to lose its leaves. Evergreens get a 4th one. We tell you to remember the holidays, which is the easiest way for me. Easter, 4th of July, Halloween, and New Year's. And that New Year's is just for evergreens. And if you fertilize regularly, you will keep your plants healthy. And a healthy plant has less stress, and you won't have as many issues, whether it's a fungal issue or bugs. As soon as a tree gets stressed out, that's when you start seeing the issues pop up. April, May, and June, you kind of watch your tree grow. This is when the flowers are going to start to turn to fruit. You're also kind of watching out for aphids, thrips, shot hole, which is a fungal disease that most of your plums and peaches can get. It looks like a shot. Someone took a shotgun and shot through your tree because there's just little bitty holes in it. Typically, it won't kill your tree that first season, but it's something you want to watch because if you let a fungal issue continue, it will eventually kill your tree. Okay. June. Okay. Yes. So her question is if you see these things, can you treat them? Absolutely. And that's what you're supposed to be paying attention for. So if you see aphids on your tree, the multi-purpose spray is what you would spray on there to get rid of the aphids and the thrips. The Revitalize is for the shot hole fungal issue, and that'll help that. And the great thing about the Revitalize is that you can use it as a foliar spray and also as a tree drench. So you can take care of it in the ground and in the leaves. And one thing, if you do have the fungal issue, is that you want to make sure that you clean up your leaves well. You don't want them to decompose into your ground, and you don't want to compost them either, because if you compost them, you're just kind of introducing that into your compost bed. Okay. June. A lot of people ask, comment, and why I have all this small little fruit. It never got bigger, and a lot of times, small fruit, there's just too much, and you will notice in that time frame, you'll start the fruit will actually start dropping, and that's the tree kind of telling you there's just too much on me. I can't handle it. So that happens naturally, but sometimes you'll get this cluster, and you'll have like 8 peaches on one little area, and they just can't handle that. So you want to kind of thin them out, and you will get bigger fruits that way. It's kind of like a grapevine, you want to prune it out so you actually get, instead of getting the little fingertip grapes, you actually get big ones. Fertilize in July, and then we can start harvesting on some plants. Cherries, peaches, and some plums and apricots all come ripe in later July. So that's exciting times. August, more harvest, because now we're getting to the fun part. This is the fun time. So our cherries, peaches, plums, and apricots. September is when we kind of start seeing our apples and pears. And then October, some of the later apples and pears will finish harvesting. And then you can do all that fun stuff, canning and baking and that. So that'll do. I also have a little kind of tricks of the trade of when things are starting to ripen, because it's kind of difficult to figure out, are we ready? Should we pick? Should we not? Obviously, if you're in that time strain, pick one off, taste it. Is it ready? Pears, we kind of start in the back and come forward. But pears, if you slice that pear open, your seeds are going to be brown, and that means it's ripe. They should twist off when they're ready. Apples are the same way. Your seeds should be nice dark brown in the middle of them. Apricots, your fruit will just start to, you'll just get a nice little squeeze. Obviously, you don't want to dent them, but it'll have a little give to it. Cherries, when your fruit is a dark color, is when your cherries are ripe. Figs, which is another fruit I did not mention, but we can do figs here. When the figs, your fruit will actually drop, and that means they're ready to pick. And peaches should come off with a twist. Last year, I waited way too long for my peaches. They were awesome, but I kept waiting for a little give, and they just didn't want to come off. And it's like, okay. So I took one off and I tasted it, and it's like, okay, we're ready. But when I took them inside my house and I was getting ready to figure out what I was going to do with them, they went, in 2 days, they started really softening up. It's like, okay, I obviously waited too long. So I've got it marked on my calendar. I'm going to check them 2 weeks earlier, and I think I'll be okay. So it's fun, it's challenging, but it's a lot of enjoyment as well. And I think that's why we're all gardeners on top of things. Yeah. Her question was, is there a pear that'll ripen after it's picked? Uh-huh. Yeah, actually the pears will, most of your apples and pears have a very long shelf life, and I don't know if that has something to do with that, but yeah. Most everything will ripen a little bit after the fact, or soften up, but I think that's more going to the other end of the spectrum. Yes, ma'am. Not that I am aware of. They just need that for production. They need the sun. Yes. And that's a very good question. So she's got a cherry tree that's, it sounds like it's on the north side, so it doesn't get a lot of sun in the wintertime, but it gets full sun in the summer. So that's perfect. And one thing about your fruit trees is that there is a thing called chill hours, and those are the amount of hours of below 45 uh, of temperatures below 45 that a tree needs through dormancy before it'll bloom. So the longer the chill hours, the later things will bloom. So most of your peaches are right around that 800. Most of your apples will actually bloom later, which is kind of the sad thing about the apricots, apricots, peaches, and nectarines. They all bloom early. So we kind of get a hit and miss on the fruit production on those. If they bloom and we have a hard frost come through, you most likely won't get peaches that year. And it just kind of depends on year to year. Last year we got peaches, and a lot of people didn't get apples. And it kind of depends on your area too. There is such a thing as strategic planting. If you plant any fruit tree kind of on the northeast side of your house, it's going to bloom later because it doesn't get that western sun. So it's not going to bloom as early as the ones on your west side of your house. So it gets you a couple of extra weeks. So it helps a lot if you can do that. Anybody else have questions? Sure. Yeah, so with the Stella, you should be fine. Even though it has 400, it's kind of ingrained in their nature to bloom a little bit later. So yeah, you should be okay. Yes. So we don't, her question was in regards to bare root trees. We have found, we used to sell them and people struggled with them. It's really hard to get a bare root tree to start here, just because our ground is so hard and compacted. So yeah, we do not sell bare root fruit trees. Yes, Facebook. Yeah. Michael, his question is he's got some established fruit trees, and should he fertilize and put manure down? Absolutely. Spring is a great time to get those ingredients down. It gives it time to melt down into the soil and get those nutrients to the root zone where they belong. One more.
Margaret would like to know, should we plant trees in Williams? It's higher and growing.
So the question in Williams is, should she plant now? And I would say yes, because our ground does not freeze all, we only got a little short frost layer. You can plant anytime, because we can dig a hole anytime. So anytime you can get a fruit tree in that's dormant, the better, and it'll do just fine, because it won't wake up until March, and you'll be fine with that. Yes, ma'am. Good question. She has a nectarine tree, and how to protect the tree after it blooms, or when it's blooming and it starts to get cold. There are frost cloths that you can put around, which is also a nice reason to keep your tree smaller because it's easier to cover. The frost cloths will add a good 5 to 10 degrees, so that helps immensely. I've heard people put the iridescent lights, the Christmas lights that we used to have, because they'll heat up. And so you just have a holiday during frost season. Yes. Yeah. Her question is do fruit trees have a lifespan? And it kind of depends on how you take care of them. The better you take care of yourself as a person, the longer you're going to live. It's the same with the trees. If you take care of your tree and feed it, care for it properly, it's going to live for a longer time. If it's been sitting there with no fertilizer, sometimes it gets water, sometimes it doesn't. It might not live long. The one thing we have to pay attention for is the issues that we tend to have, the borers in the peaches and the cherries, the aphids that we get on the leaves that can do some damage. So it's all about paying attention to your tree and enjoy your garden. You should be out there every day enjoying it. Yes. Is there a rule about thinning? So for a new tree, I would take the majority of them off when they're young. Once they're over 3 years old, you can leave it, but it kind of depends on the tree. I mean, if it's a full-grown tree, you could probably let it, but a lot of them will grow in a group, and I would say you don't want more than one or two in a group of the fruit. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. So yeah, you would just pick one or two of them off, and that allow it to get bigger. You want to keep one or two just to taste. You can keep a few more because it is getting stronger, and then, like I said, after that third year, you should be good to go. Yeah. Most of these are going to be in that 5 to 7 year. There's some peaches over there that are probably more closer to that 3 to 5. But most of the trees here that you'll see will fruit this year. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. The main ingredient in it is mineral oil, so yeah, it's totally a safe fruit to use. One thing about the oils is you want to kind of be careful of is making sure you're doing it early in the morning and later in the evening. Oils, just like when we were young and we used to slather ourselves with baby oil so we can get that great tan, it makes things burn. And anybody that's been here, especially last year, our heat gets so intense. We are a mile high, so it's even more intense here. So you want to make sure you do it at the right time of day. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? One thing I do want to mention is watering. Watering, for anybody that hasn't been to one of these classes, we kind of harp on it. You don't have to water as often as you think you do, but you still have to water. So newly established plants, we kind of recommend to water once or twice a week. And I say that very cautiously because it's going to depend on where you live and what type of soil you have. So most of us have a generous supply of clay, which is a great ingredient because it does hold that moisture. But we have to be cautious with it too because it does hold that moisture and we can tend to overwater with it. Some of us have the DG that drains really fast, so you might be more on that every twice a week time frame. You want to water deeply, less often, because that gets to your bottom of your root structure. So everybody that's got a system, irrigation system that's running more than twice a week, shut it off. Even your established plants, once a week, if you're watering deeply, will make that plant survive. If you're watering shallow, if you're watering 10 minutes every day, it's like throwing a glass of water on it. It's not doing anything except evaporating. So water deeply, thoroughly, less often, and you'll have a stronger, healthier root system. Yeah. I think it's in a couple of weeks, usually towards the end of February, March. Yeah. And if you want to get a head start, if you go to our YouTube channel, there are fruit tree pruning classes on that as well, and really good ones. The one last year was great. We had Jonny's tree service here, and he went into really good detail about it. Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. Absolutely. So she was asking about more established plants, what you want to do. Actually, established plants once a week is all they need. Obviously, if we're in 100 degrees and the wind's blowing 20 miles an hour, you might need to add a second watering. But don't do it. As soon as our temperatures go down, go back to once a week. Trees can be really easily overwatered or underwatered. That's why it's really important to do it less often, deeper, because you'll have a stronger, healthier root system. And if you miss a watering, your tree's not going to suffer because it's got that huge root system down there to keep it healthier. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Her question was watering in the winter. Winter watering is very, very important. As you can see, this winter we've had one snowstorm. That's it. And yeah, your trees looks like this, but those roots need moisture. If they dry out, you won't have any leaves in the spring. So every 2 weeks, if we do not get any significant snow, you need to water deeply. If you don't know how much to water, we kind of guesstimate for every foot of height, 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons. It kind of gives you a range. And for those of you that have shrubs and perennials and everything all on one system, add emitters. That's the way you can do everything all at once. So if you have a big tree and a small shrub in the same zone, your tree should have 4 or 5 emitters on there, so it's getting the 30 gallons it needs, whereas your shrub needs 5. So there's always a way around it. Huh? Oh, yeah. I mentioned stakes. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. We will wrap this up.